Hi, and thank you so much for joining us. Well, I'm very excited to have the opportunity to talk to Valentine Low, the author of Power and the Palace, and it's really intriguing. Welcome, Valentine. I really enjoyed your book.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me on the show.
Well, the reason why I loved your book is I think it's very rare to be educated but not know you're being educated and be thoroughly entertained at the same time. And that's the magic of this book, because I just felt entertained, particularly even your prologue was so clever and entertaining. And I was intrigued to learn that King Charles III is not the only one that suffered a leaky pen.
I know. Yeah, William the Fourth is extraordinary, who had a leaky pen and a short temper, just like his descendant.
Yeah, and it was also fascinating that he was the oldest monarch until King Charles III actually ascended to the throne. He was also considered, well, he was the oldest to ever ascend
Exactly,
to the throne. Yeah.
and everyone forgets about William the Fourth. He was just a sailor king. He was the one before Victoria. No one knows much about him, but yeah, he held this record for a very long time until
He
Charles came.
does. Well, now I've learnt that he had a leaky pen. That's all I need to know. Your book is a fascinating look behind the scenes between the relationships between the monarch and the PM over 2 centuries. That's a really hefty task. How could you possibly approach this? Did you just do it in a timeline?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to start with Victoria because I'd seen. I don't know if you saw it in Australia, but I saw this television program about Victoria starring Jenna Coleman a few years back, and then read one or two biographies, and it just struck me that she really got stuck into the politics. She was really meddlesome. I mean, poor old Charles and his Black Spider memos are sort of quite amateur by comparison, and so she tried to sort of influence who the prime minister was going to be. She tried to get ministers sacked. She tried to interfere with government policy. She even tried to make the Whigs, which is kind of the equivalent of the Liberal Party in this country now, she tried to help them win the election by secretly giving money to their campaign. Absolutely extraordinary stuff, and just all of which would be totally unacceptable now. And I was just interested in how we got from there to here. So in the intervening sort of century and a bit, depending on where you count it from, no one wrote a new rule book. No one said, okay, from now on, this is what monarchs can do in the political sphere. But it just gradually changed. And I was just interested in looking, into how it changed and why it changed.
That was extraordinary, really. You shocked me when I read that in the book. And you just illustrated Queen Victoria really throwing a weight around. That's what she did. She
did, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Really over the top. And it was really only her husband, Albert, that was any sort of good influence on her. I mean, he tried to rein her in a little bit and tried to explain to her that she couldn't be quite so political. But yeah, she got a lot worse after he left, after he died.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, when she paid money to the Whigs, on the sly to help their electoral campaign, he was quite cross when he found out about it. He thought you shouldn't do that. Right. So they definitely had different. She was definitely, and I think that if he hadn't died when he did, things might have been very different in terms of her political involvement.
Yes, well, but she was just such a great way to open up the book, because it just illustrated how far we've come. And it is extraordinary, like you said, that there's nothing written down. There's nothing that actually instructs monarchs to come, or the current one we have now, how to behave.
Yeah,
other than the Constitution.
Well, there are two interesting things about the Constitution. One is that so Britain famously does not have a written Constitution. Well, bits of it are written here and there, but it's not written in one document, certainly.
No.
And there's a very famous writer called Walter Bagehot who wrote a book called The English Constitution, which has becomes a set text. I mean, all monarchs, certainly up to Charles, all monarchs post-Victoria up to Charles have all read their Walter Bagehot. And he came up with the very famous phrase that monarchs have the right to be consulted, to encourage, and to warn. But so Bagehot was writing all this stuff, which everyone quotes all the time. Bagehot was writing this in the middle of the 19th century when Victoria was on the throne. And the extraordinary thing is, Victoria was doing none of this. Victoria was breaking every rule that Walter Bagehot laid out. And she thought he was a dangerous radical. When she realized her eldest son, Bertie, who became Edward VII, when she realized he was reading Bagehot, she was quite cross because she thought, he was no good. So Bagehot wasn't writing what was going on at the time. Bagehot was writing what he thought should happen. And has since then has been sort of taken on board as what we think should happen. There's also the other thing.
The poor man, he was probably just really desperately trying to get the point across.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the other thing is the famous sort of historian called Peter Hennessy, Lord Hennessy, who I interviewed for this book. And he told me about how once he'd been in the House of Commons and he'd bumped into a very sort of eminent constitutional expert, so the absolute sort of the top of the tree in terms of people who know about the Constitution. This chap said to him, "Do you know what? I've been studying the Constitution for 45 years, and I've come to the conclusion." Peter was obviously waiting. "I've come to the conclusion that the Constitution is what happens." Oh, right. Okay, thank you.
Well, that's like a get out of jail free card, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
A lot of scope in that answer.
A lot of scope, yeah.
Yeah. The chemistry between the sovereign and the prime minister, you illustrate how vital that is. Was there any relationship that really surprised you?
One of the relationships, I guess there are three answers. That one is Victoria, not any one relationship, but how often she changed her mind. So for instance, Disraeli, everyone knows that Victoria loved Disraeli, and she did love Disraeli. But when she first knew about him, she couldn't stand him because he was always being rude about Robert Peel. They were on different wings of the Tory party, and Disraeli was always attacking Peel in the Commons, and Victoria thought this was disgraceful. So she changed her mind about Disraeli. And another chap she hated was Lord Palmerston. But when she first met him, she loved him. She was very young. He was Foreign Secretary. He used to tell her how to sort of write letters to foreign heads of state, and she thought he was great. Then she couldn't stand him for a while. Then he became prime minister, and she liked him again. She very mercurial. So that was one thing that surprised me.
Right.
Another thing that surprised, I've got a long list of things. I'll stop eventually.
No, that's good. I'm interested.
Was how monarchs often have a very good relationship with sort of quite earthy working class people. So, I mean, there was a great example of that with George V and this chap called Jimmy Thomas, who was a Welsh railwayman and became a Welsh union official and eventually became a minister in the first Labour government in 1924. Very, very earthy character, and had a fantastic relationship with George V. George V loved him. And another one was George VI, who had a fantastic relationship with Ernest Bevin, who is this working class union official from the West Country, who rose to become Foreign Secretary under Clem Attlee, and was in fact one of the best foreign secretaries this country ever had. But Bevin was a very colourful character. Drank too much, ate too much, smoked too much. Was never in good health. And once at Buckingham Palace, Bevin introduced the king to his doctor. And he said, "Your Majesty, this is Alec. He treats my behind like a dartboard." And the king loved it.
Yes.
And once at Buckingham Palace, Bevin shook hands while his other hand was in his pocket. Very sort of casually kept his hand in his pocket and shook hands. And one of the equerries, voiced his disapproval of this to the king. And the king said, "I don't mind. He's a proper Englishman and I like him."
Oh, you can just tell that it's probably because they're interacting with someone who's real. He's not
Yeah,
sort of,
exactly.
being all sycophantic, and because that would
Yeah,
get so incredibly boring, wouldn't it?
yeah,
And
yeah,
so just
exactly.
that refreshing honesty and the fact they could have a laugh and have a joke, it would just
Yeah,
be so
exactly.
refreshing. In that vein, Disraeli, I've got your quote here saying that he never contradicted Queen Victoria, and I'm paraphrasing now, but when it comes to royalty, you have to lay flattery on with a trowel. And I
Absolutely.
thought,
Yeah.
well,
And boy, oh boy,
has
he
any,
did.
yeah, has anything really changed?
I think they're probably a bit more subtle about it these days. I think,
Really?
yeah.
Is that a
Uh,
diplomatic answer?
yeah, no, no. I mean, but also, I think the idea, Disraeli's dictum about "I never contradict," I think that's a wise one. I think that still holds today.
Yeah.
You don't want to contradict your, well, I say monarch, but or chief executive, you're anyone in a position of power over you. The way you deal with
Yes.
them as their underling is not to contradict them. But if you want to
Yes.
achieve a different end, you have to work out more subtle means of getting them to bend to your will. And yeah,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
but never
Yeah.
contradicting. I think that's a good dictum for all times.
Yes, actually, that's a really good point. I didn't even think of that. Of course, you do. In every sort of business situation, you have to do that, don't you? So I guess it's no different. So Victoria really missed his flattery when he left office. And so she hatched a plan to be able to communicate with him still, which was just completely the wrong thing to do, wasn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And glad. I mean, it was utterly reprehensible, completely wrong. And Gladstone suspected her of doing it because he was then prime minister, and made noises about what he'd do if he found out. But obviously he was right. But luckily, it never came to light at the time. But yeah,
Yeah.
she behaved shamelessly in terms of communicating with, and she'd done it earlier with Lord Melbourne, when Lord Melbourne, who was her first prime minister, who she absolutely adored, old enough to be her
Yeah.
grandfather, but very good looking, very witty. And she was this impressionable 18-year-old, and she absolutely had a crush on him.
Mm.
And she communicated with him after he was no longer
Yes.
prime minister, and even asked his advice about what to do. I mean, absolutely what you shouldn't do. But
It's
she broke
really
every.
interesting, though, because there's a parallel there with the late Queen Elizabeth II and John Major, because you tell us that they pretty much maintained their relationship up until, well, her
Yes, I
death.
mean, I think, but I think that was in a non-political way. I'm sure. I'm
Right,
sure she
right,
absolutely stuck to the rules. But
right.
there are
Yeah,
other issues that she could talk to him about that didn't impinge on the political sphere.
yeah. I was really
And I think
moved.
she liked his advice. He's a very warm, empathetic man, and someone you
Yeah.
can talk to. There was also a good reason to talk to him, because she had made him chairman of her Diamond Jubilee Trust. This is a trust to mark the
Right.
Jubilee. Uh, um, so there were perfectly good reasons to talk to him, but
Yeah.
it just reflects the kind of the solidity and warmth of their relationship, I think.
I think it was really moving what you said about John Major, where you told us the full story, particularly how he was asked to sort of be the honest broker between Charles and Diana. And I could just imagine the stress he was under, the way you described that he would go and speak to Diana. And it was really interesting that she often felt encouraged and
Yeah, she
heartened
she
after
like she
he'd visited.
they'd have tea together, and she really liked it. And she used to call him the On John, And it was just
No.
it just reflected the sort of, the affection and respect that she had for him. I mean, he wasn't going to repair. He wasn't a marriage counselor in the sense he was going to repair the marriage, but he wanted to make this crisis, as proceed as smoothly as possible, be as undestructive as possible. He wanted to make sure that Diana, had a role after the separation. He just wanted to make sure that someone was listening to her.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also, he just would have been in such a difficult position because he was also meeting with Charles, and of course he wouldn't be betraying any confidences. And then he had to have his weekly audience with the Queen as well.
Yeah.
I mean, the poor man, I don't know how he didn't have an ulcer.
Three ways. I mean, yes.
Yeah, it would be awful.
But he's also, he's a model of discretion. I tried very hard to get things out of him about what he said to the Queen, and he wasn't playing.
Yeah. Well, that's sort of good in a way, isn't it? Because
I respect that. Yeah, I do respect that.
Yeah, he's exactly the man that you portrayed then, which is really wonderful. I encourage people to even just get the book, because I found that so moving that there was actually a political player that was a really good person. That was very heartening. I really enjoyed that aspect. So King Edward VII, loved the really fun story about him heading over to France and a secret visit. And I thought that's really the first example of that soft power of the monarchy. But he did it all off his own bat. Can you tell that story? I know you've probably told it a million times, but
no, I absolutely can tell. I've not told it a million times, but I have told it once. So it's 1903. Our relationship with France is a bit sticky, and the way global politics is going, we need to improve our relationship with France. And Edward VII, he's been on the throne a couple of years. He goes off for a tour of Europe, and he's going to go to Portugal, he's going to go to Rome, and places like that. But when he sets off with this huge amount of baggage, what he doesn't tell anyone, so not the foreign secretary, not the British ambassador to Paris, not even his own wife. What he doesn't tell anyone is that secretly he plans to call in on France on the way home. And the government doesn't even find out about this until he's in Gibraltar on his way to Italy, when he lets them know. And when he arrives in France, he's pretty unpopular because the British are unpopular in France at the time. And so this is shortly after, a couple of years after the Boer War, and people sort of in the street shout, "Vive les Boers," at him and things like that. But he kind of wins them round. I mean, he knows Paris, he's been there many times before, he speaks French. I think he might have possibly had one or two lady friends in Paris over the years. And he charms them. He charms them. In the theatre one night, he sees this well-known French actress, and he goes up to her and says, I saw your performance in London. You so personified all the grace, all the esprit of France, and you could just imagine, say, "Oh, Your Majesty." Anyway, he completely wins them over, and by the end of the trip, they all love him. They're all shouting "Vive le roi" and stuff like that, and that helped set the tone for the famous agreement between Britain and France the following year, called the Entente Cordiale. Now, he didn't negotiate the Entente Cordiale; he had nothing whatsoever to do with the detail of it. But this is the way soft power works. He set the context, he set the kind of the feeling of benevolence and goodwill that was necessary for those negotiations to proceed. It's very important.
Yeah, it laid the foundation. I guess we've just had the classic example with Donald Trump's state visit, and the way William back before all that, when even the Prime Minister couldn't get an audience. with Donald Trump. William, of course, met up with him at that funeral, didn't he? And it was just that sort of softening of relations immediately. And it's just such a living example.
Donald Trump absolutely, loves the royal family and absolutely loved William, said he was a very handsome man. But of course, it only goes so far.
Yes.
William is not negotiating the tariff rates. King Charles is not negotiating the tariff rates, but they help set the mood, and the politicians then have to do the hard work. And it has its limits. One thing that was very interesting, the head of the Foreign Office told me this, that around the time, when we were going to have a referendum about leaving the European Union, they hatched a plan to send members of the royal family to every single member state of the EU, every single one. And we as royal correspondents had noticed there were a lot of royal trips to Europe, and we did suspect what was going on. But to have the head of the Foreign Office tell me that this was a plan to send the royals to every single one, and it was kind of twofold, because the point started being this: David Cameron was trying to negotiate a better deal with the EU, because if he succeeded, he hoped that would help persuade people to vote Remain rather than Leave. But of course, these visits extended after the referendum, so it then became saying, well, after we've left, we still want to be your friends. But the point is, and Germany, which of course was the most important member state of the EU for us in terms of this, Angela Merkel, very big political figure, they had 3 royal visits over a period of small number of years, including a state visit by the Queen, and it didn't work. Cameron did not persuade Angela Merkel, and German national self-interest sort of trumped the warm, fuzzy feeling, nice, warm, fuzzy feeling you get from a royal state visit. So it can set the mood, it can set the context, it can lay the foundations, but it can't do the deal.
Right, that's really interesting. Also, I wanted to ask you about the sovereign asking their PM to help with family squabbles and to help sort out family messes.
It's just a theme that pops up over the years. When royals are having problems with troublesome offspring, which all families have problems with troublesome offspring, and with royals it's just a bit more public. They look, who can we ask to help, and they'll often turn to the Prime Minister to help. It's extraordinary. So this happened with Victoria. So when her son Bertie, who became Edward VII, Bertie was leading this very, very rackety life, gambling, women, gambling. I mean, she really was going for it. She asked Lord Palmerston, Victoria asked Lord Palmerston, I think this was at a stage when they were getting on, she asked him to write to Bertie and trying to get him to desist. I don't think he did desist, but and then it happened again. Then it happened again with when George V was on the throne, and his son. I love roles; they're so confusing with the names. His son David, who became Edward VIII, anyway, the Prince of Wales. The Prince of Wales. He was riding in point to point, so these horse races over the English countryside. Jumping over hedges, easily fall off your horse and break your neck. He was riding in point to points, and the king thought this was dangerous and he should stop. And David wouldn't listen to him, so he got the Prime Minister, the Labour Prime Minister, Ramsay MacDonald, to write to him. I don't think made the blindest bit of difference, but he was turning to the Prime Minister to help him. And of course, more recently, there was Boris.
Yes, with Harry.
This was during when Harry and Meghan were about to leave Britain to go off and do their own thing. And Boris claims in his memoirs that someone from the palace asked him to try and persuade them not to go. I mean, I've got to say that if you're reduced to asking Boris to champion your cause, you're pretty desperate. but he did have a meeting with Harry. I think they were both at the same engagement somewhere in London together, and they had a private 20-minute meeting. And at the time, we didn't know what they talked about. But a few years later, Boris wrote his memoirs, we did learn what they talked about. Obviously, Harry didn't listen to him, and who can blame him? But the palace, interestingly, denied this. They said, no, we didn't ask him. And I think, although Boris's relationship with the truth can be a little fuzzy at times, I don't think Boris would have totally made this up. I mean, it seems an odd thing to make up.
Yes.
What I suspect, it was an informal request by someone in or near the palace. So someone somewhere may have said something. So I think the anecdote is definitely based on truth. But perhaps this wasn't, the Queen's private secretary asking Boris. It was someone a bit more on the fringes.
Yeah, so there's always those degrees of separation, isn't there?
Exactly.
Always have that deniability. So fascinated by the story about Diana managing to tame Alistair Campbell. I mean, that's a fascinating story. And the fact that he basically just went to goo.
Alistair Campbell was absolutely besotted with Diana. I mean, first met her with there was a dinner arranged for Tony Blair before he became Prime Minister, but everyone knew that he was going to become Prime Minister. The Tories were doing so badly in the polls. There was a dinner arranged somewhere in London through mutual friends for Blair to meet Diana. The 2 days, the first dinner that Blair was at with Diana, at the end of the dinner, Campbell came to pick up Tony Blair. They were going off to party headquarters to see election results or something. And Blair came out of the house and said to Alistair Campbell, there's someone here who'd like to meet you. At which point Diana emerges, because she heard, Alistair Campbell was a well-known figure already at that point. He was the sort of master of dark arts. He was the spin doctor, very Machiavellian person. And Diana was fascinated and quite clearly wished she had an Alistair Campbell on her staff.
Yes.
And, absolutely. Alistair Campbell was putty in her hands. And then after that, there was another dinner which Campbell actually also attended, and his love for Diana had not diminished. But actually, I spoke to about all this to a senior Labour figure, should we say, who was around at the time, and this figure said to me, he said, Alistair was ridiculous. He thought she fancied him, She knew exactly what she was doing.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I think she was very sort of mischievous, but I mean, I think she just loved the ability to tame people, particularly people. I mean, he was very anti-Diana, wasn't he? He'd written some, quite damning things about it.
He'd written some rude stuff, and he could have. This dinner, he apologized to her about it. He felt ashamed.
Oh, well, look, she had that magic. You've got to admire that. I was going to say, too, what was the next thing? Peter Mandelson, which I didn't know. I knew that there was sort of around the Boland era, and that Charles and Camilla had people over for dinner, and someone had been very frank with him about the fact that he always looks like he's self-pitying and miserable. And I didn't know that was Peter Mandelson. There's other moments where he was very frank with him, wasn't there?
Yeah, well, there's this absolute key moment. In a way, it's one of the key moments in the book. So the Blair government is in power, and genetically modified food is a big issue. Some people were very frightened about it. The Daily Mail's running a campaign calling it Frankenstein food. It's big, and the government is trying to allay people's fears about GM produce. And Prince Charles, as he was then, Prince Charles writes an article for the Daily Mail. And it has quite an inflammatory headline. I mean, probably pushes the article a bit more than the actual content. But anyway, the Blair government, is furious. They think it's interfering with government policy. They think it's unscientific. They're absolutely mad. But the interesting thing is they don't pick a public fight with him. I mean, Blair is spitting tacks, but he doesn't take on Charles at all about this. But eventually, he gets Peter Mandelson, who has, this, as you said, Mandelson has a relationship with Charles. He gets Mandelson to ring him, and Mandelson rings him from his car in a traffic jam in New York, and basically tells him, "You've gone too far. You've got to lay off." And this is a kind of absolutely fascinating moment, I think, because it's the one time that I know about where the government has said to the royal family, constitutionally, you've overstepped the mark. You can't do that. This, as we've discussed, this unwritten constitution where the rules aren't necessarily clear. This is the government saying these are the rules. Back off.
Yes, and I thought it was really interesting too how King Charles pretty much made up his own distinction between what he could say when he was the then Prince Charles and when he was King Charles III. I mean, you make the point that he pretty much made it up as he was going along and he got away with it.
Yeah, I mean, because when he say, he famously said at one point, that he wouldn't be meddlesome when he was king because he knew the difference between being Prince of Wales and being sovereign. And it just made me think, well, you're begging the question, mate. What is the difference? Who lays it down? No one does. And if you're on Charles's side, if you're on Team Charles, you say, oh well, he has an instinct for these things, and it's all good. And if you're being a little more skeptical, a little more critical, you say, well, he makes it up as he goes along and sees how far he can push it until Mandelson tells him you pushed it too far.
Yes. I don't think Peter Mandelson will be telling him much at the moment, though.
No, I don't think so.
So you sort of finish up the book with William, and it's really interesting because the distinction between him as Duke of Cambridge compared to him as the Prince of Wales. And he's still apolitical, he's still careful and, polite, but you make the point that there's now more of a strength, more of a we'll be doing this rather than do you think we should.
That was really interesting. That came from Michael Gove, who had dealings with him. The thing about these government ministers is very interesting. Sometimes we all think it's all about the Prime Minister, but actually all these other ministers also have dealings with them, and some more than others, and some more insightful about their dealings. And Michael Gove, who's a clever chap, he's very insightful, and he just had these two different serious interactions with William. Once in 2018 when William was the Duke of Cambridge, it was all about the illegal wildlife trade. And basically the way Michael Gove described it is, this is William saying, he's quite firm and confident, but this is William saying, how can I help? And then later when William is launching his homelessness project, is it 23? I think so. William was saying, these are my plans. Much greater firmness. He described me as sort of acting like chairman of the board. His advisors, his people were all there, but he was the chairman of the board. He was definitely taking control. He grows in confidence, but I still think he's a more cautious. I mean, he's got that Windsor obstinacy that his father has, but he's also a more cautious man than his father. As witnessed by when launching the homelessness thing, he saw Michael Gove because he was seeing government ministers to make sure that it wasn't interfering with government policy, wasn't treading on any political toes. He did want to be kept, he wasn't going to blunder in, whereas I think you could accuse Charles of having blundered in at various points in his life. William is much more cautious and careful than that. His role model is his grandmother, not his father.
Yes, and I guess William had more of an opportunity to have more of a normal life.
Yes.
Just the fact that he did the air ambulance experience and he went to uni and he got to live with Catherine, out of the public eye. That would have to make you more normal in your approach, you would think. But it's going to be interesting to see what sort of king he is. It's
going to be fascinating, yeah.
Yeah, it is. Thank you so much for joining me. I've got one more question. I do want to finish up with your beautiful quote about the debt of gratitude to the woman who helped the monarchy adapt to modern times, Queen Elizabeth II. And you're saying how, the current monarch and his heir really owe a lot to that. But I wanted to ask you something unrelated to the book. Do you miss travelling in the press pool, being at the back of a plane on a royal tour?
That's those tours were amazing. I mean, it was an amazing privilege to fly all the way around the world, all sorts of absolutely fantastic places, places that one just wouldn't see normally. It was amazing, and you saw some amazing things, and you saw the royals close up. But they were also quite, great privilege, but also hard work. I mean, you were really just taking sometimes you take 13 flights in 11 days or something crazy, it was, and getting up at dawn and finishing at 11 o'clock at night. So they were quite hard work, and sometimes you'd nurture rebellious thoughts while on these tours.
I could imagine. Did they provide all your food and everything? Like, were you well looked after?
No. No. What they do, sometimes you're on the royal plane with them, and sometimes not. But even when you are, that's generally just for the big flight in and the big flight out. The in-between stuff, it's too logistically difficult to, So you have to you have to make your own travel arrangements. You have to feed yourself. I mean, if you're on their plane, you might get a little plane lunch. That's about you. You basically have to look after yourself.
Right. Did you get any booze? Did you get a glass of wine or something?
At the end of the day, Shauna, I might have had a small dry sherry. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's very good. You sound very, very disciplined. Well, thank you so much. It's just been lovely to talk to you. You've just made the book come alive. I highly recommend it to everybody. I genuinely did enjoy it. I know people say that when they interview authors, oh, I loved your book, but I genuinely loved your book, and I highly recommend it to everyone. We'll be linking it in the description box down below so that everyone can just click through and buy it. And I hope you support our guest and do just that. Thank you very much, Valentine.
Shauna, thank you very much, and it's absolutely lovely talking to you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.